The bells of Windsor tolled mournfully as the world grieved the loss of Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest-serving monarch, the woman who shaped an era and stood as the steadfast pillar of a family marked by scandal, strength, and silence. As the nation laid her to rest beneath the stones of St. George's Chapel, a new reign quietly began, but not without its shadows. Behind the black veils and within the hushed halls of Buckingham Palace, a secret quietly stirred. It wasn't about politics, treaties, or global affairs. It was something far more intimate, far more powerful. A private will, handwritten by the Queen herself, locked away in her Balmoral desk, intended only for her most trusted child, Princess Anne. For decades, the world watched Prince Charles rise to the throne, Camilla by his side, and William and Kate readying themselves for the future crown. Yet while the public witnessed a tradition unfolding like a carefully staged drama, they had no idea what the Queen left behind, a message of truth, loyalty, and final wishes she never revealed in life. When Princess Anne finally disclosed the contents of that secret will, King Charles reportedly broke down in tears. It wasn't only sorrow, it was shock, regret, and perhaps even guilt. But before we continue, we'd love for you to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying this video. If you just did, we truly appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the main content. Because this will wasn't just about titles or riches. It held buried truths, names the Queen protected, relationships she questioned, and decisions she delayed for the sake of appearances. Her words praised Anne's quiet devotion, reaffirmed her trust in William, and most notably, never once acknowledged Camilla as queen. With that revelation, a new fracture tore through the royal family, one not sparked by tabloid headlines or public interviews, but by the Queen's own unfiltered final voice. This is the story of what unfolded after the world said farewell to Elizabeth II, and how the crown she left behind grew heavier than ever. Some secrets can't stay buried. And when a mother speaks from beyond the grave, even a king must listen. Balmoral Castle had always been Queen Elizabeth's refuge, her private sanctuary away from the relentless pressures of public life. It was where she spent childhood summers, strolled with her beloved corgis, and in later years found peace amid a world in turmoil and a family slowly fracturing. But in the weeks following her death, Balmoral became the backdrop for something extraordinary. Hidden away in a locked drawer in the Queen's private study, among old letters, diaries, and faded family photos, Princess Anne uncovered an envelope. Not just any envelope. It bore her mother's personal wax seal and instructions that it was to be opened by Anne alone before sharing with the rest of the family. At first, it was thought to be a simple farewell note. But inside, Anne found something far more profound. A handwritten will in the Queen's own dark navy ink, penned in her neat, unmistakable cursive. This document wasn't official, nor was it meant for the eyes of Parliament or the Privy Council. It was intensely personal. Within its pages, the Queen laid bare her true feelings about the future of the monarchy, her children, and the heirlooms and titles that held the most meaning for her, not the crown itself. According to palace insiders, Princess Anne was deeply unsettled by what she found. The Queen voiced growing concerns over the royal family's direction, specifically calling Charles and Camilla's leadership unstable. While the official transfer of power to King Charles was unavoidable, the Queen's private words revealed quiet but sharp doubts. She acknowledged Charles's dedication to duty, but questioned his emotional insight. Camilla, notably, was absent from every significant mention. Not once was she called queen, consort, or even wife. The silence was deafening. In stark contrast, the Queen lavished praise on Princess Anne, describing her as the family's rock, someone who never sought recognition but earned it through steadfast loyalty. She called Anne her silent sword, a defender of the crown through action rather than words. Then there was William. To Prince William, the Queen dedicated a brief but powerful note. "You bear the weight of the people's trust. When my light fades, let your mother's guidance lead you." Many interpreted this as a deliberate transfer of moral authority, bypassing Charles altogether. The Queen mentioned Diana but left Camilla unspoken. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Deep within the document lay a section titled simply Legacy. There, the Queen requested that certain heirlooms break from traditional inheritance. Most strikingly, she asked for Diana's sapphire and diamond tiara, which hadn't been seen in public for decades, to be given to Princess Charlotte upon coming of age, honoring her grandmother, the beloved people's queen. The implications were enormous. Royal insiders whispered that this would infuriate Camilla, who had long hoped the Queen's jewels would be redistributed to affirm her own royal status. Instead, the Queen ensured Diana's memory would remain untouchable. When Anne revealed the will to the family during a quiet night at Windsor, the room reportedly fell into stunned silence. Charles, already worn thin by grief and ceremony, was visibly shaken. It said he covered his eyes as Anne read the final line aloud. "Duty is not inherited by title, but earned by character. Let my love guide you, not just my crown." The moment was more than symbolic. It was earth-shattering. This was not merely a farewell. It was a reckoning. A posthumous course correction from a monarch determined to protect the crown by speaking the truth, no matter how painful. And now, that truth was about to fracture the royal family from the inside out, starting with the king himself. For years, Princess Anne had worked quietly behind the scenes of the monarchy, not invisible, but seldom celebrated. She wasn't the one photographers chased down red carpets, nor the face emblazoned on souvenir mugs. Yet quietly and steadily, Anne had become the most reliable pillar of the royal family. While others crumbled under scandal or chased the spotlight, Anne showed up, day after day, duty after duty, and Queen Elizabeth had taken notice. It came as no surprise to palace insiders that the Queen chose Anne to bear her most private and painful secret. Not Charles, not Andrew, not even William. It was Anne, the daughter who never wavered, who never betrayed the family's core values, never embarrassed the crown, and never sought the limelight. Her reward wasn't applause, it was trust. Within the palace walls, Anne had always been the Queen's quiet right hand. Their bond was more than blood. It was forged through shared duty, a mutual love of horses, a distaste for drama, and an unspoken understanding that the job always came before feelings. So when the Queen sat down, perhaps months before her death, to write her secret will, she didn't hesitate over who it should go to. She knew there was only one person who would honor its message without twisting it for personal gain. One person who wouldn't leak or distort its meaning. Anne. When Anne first read the will inside Balmoral's study, those close to her say she didn't cry or shake. She simply nodded. Her mother's words weren't a shock. They confirmed what Anne had long suspected. She'd witnessed the family drifting apart. She'd watched Charles struggle to manage the narrative. She'd noticed Camilla's growing influence with quiet unease. And she'd kept her vow not to interfere publicly. But now she held the Queen's voice. So Anne did what she always did, acted with integrity. She gathered the family in Windsor's private drawing room. No cameras, no press, just blood relatives. There, with no fanfare, she read aloud the Queen's final message. Some in the room remained stoic, others were stunned, a few were angry, but Anne never faltered. When Charles wiped tears from his eyes, Anne reportedly placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Not to comfort, but to remind him that grief could never outweigh responsibility. This wasn't about Anne seizing power. She never wanted it. But in that moment, one thing was clear. The Queen had chosen Anne not to rule, but to guard the monarchy's soul, a final protector of truth, a sword of discretion, and an unshakable sister. In a family known for its divisions and betrayals, Anne stood as the only person the Queen trusted without question. And now, carrying that heavy trust, Anne faced a choice: keep the secret buried to preserve peace, or reveal it, knowing it might shatter the crown in order to save it. Her decision came fast, and it would change everything. When Princess Anne finished reading the Queen's private will aloud, a heavy silence fell over Windsor, thick enough to weigh down the very air. The Queen's words had been gentle on the page, but thunderous in their meaning, and no one felt that weight more than King Charles III, her eldest son, and now a monarch exposed to the harsh glare of truth. Charles had always believed this moment would bring closure, maybe even peace. He had mourned his mother in the public eye, walking solemnly before the world. He spoke movingly at memorials, honoring her legacy. He accepted the crown, took the oaths, and endured the relentless scrutiny. But what he wasn't prepared for, and never could have been, was the quiet judgment hidden in her final words. The Queen didn't explicitly reject him or remove him from the throne in her private will, but by passing a powerful legacy to Anne, entrusting Diana's treasured heirlooms to William and Charlotte, and completely leaving out Camilla in any lasting capacity, the message was unmistakable. She had doubts about his reign. According to insiders close to the palace, Charles tried at first to keep his composure. He sat with his hands clenched tightly in his lap, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the floor as Anne read aloud. But when the Queen's closing line echoed through the room, "Duty is not inherited by title but earned by character," something inside him cracked. A witness described how Charles, still wearing his black mourning tie, slowly stood up, turned toward the window, and whispered, "I wasn't ready for this." Those 5 words, barely spoken, carried a lifetime of pain. They weren't just about the letter. They were about his entire journey. He wasn't ready as a boy, groomed to be king but raised by a mother who rarely showed affection. He wasn't ready when Diana shattered the fairy tale. He wasn't ready when Camilla became the storm swirling around the crown. And now, after finally ascending and being crowned, he was faced with the reminder in his mother's own handwriting that maybe this crown wasn't meant for him after all. He didn't respond aloud. He didn't have to. Her presence alone was a steadying force, even as the world he knew crumbled beneath him. Palace aides later revealed that Charles refused to appear in public for the rest of the night. He stayed locked in his chambers for hours, clutching a single photo of his mother. He didn't sob openly, but those nearby heard muffled cries and the same question repeated quietly. "Why didn't she tell me?" It wasn't anger consuming Charles. It was hurt. The hurt of a child inflicted by a mother's silence. Despite all the speeches, ceremonies, and crowns, Charles had hoped, desperately, that in her final act the Queen would have told him, "You're ready, my son." But instead, that reassurance had been reserved for Anne through legacy and symbolism, for William. So now the king, no longer just a monarch but a grieving son, faced a truth far harsher than abdication. He had inherited the throne, but lost the one voice he desperately needed to believe in his right to rule. And that truth echoed louder than any royal proclamation. As the shock from Queen Elizabeth's secret will spread through Windsor's inner circle, another figure sat quietly, still but burning inside. Camilla, Queen Consort, entitled, yes, but now stripped of something far more crucial than public approval, validation from the one woman whose opinion mattered most. For Camilla, becoming queen had been a hard-fought battle. Years of scandal, tabloid attacks, and public scorn had left deep wounds. She was branded the other woman, the mistress, the one blamed for shattering a fairy tale. Though time and carefully managed public relations had softened public opinion, behind palace walls, forgiveness was far harder to come by. She hadn't just married Charles for love. She sought position, permanence. She endured the humiliation of being sidelined, only to finally ascend as queen consort after the queen's passing. But now, one handwritten document unraveled it all. Queen Elizabeth's words praised William's quiet strength and his connection to the people. She lauded Anne's unwavering loyalty and even recognized Harry's troubled path. But Camilla? Barely mentioned. No personal tribute, no sign of trust, no acknowledgement of her role beside Charles. It was as if she had been erased. Whether intentional or not, the omission felt like betrayal. According to royal aides present when Anne read the will, Camilla maintained a composed exterior, stone-faced, regal even. But those closest to her noticed a change in her eyes. First disbelief, then a chill of anger. Later, in a private corridor, she reportedly snapped at a senior aide, "So that's it. I was never part of her plan." Her voice was low but dripping with venom. This wasn't mere disappointment. It was devastation cloaked in contempt. She had spent years clawing her way into the royal family, mastering protocol, smiling alongside the Queen at public events, playing her part perfectly. But now the harsh truth was undeniable. No matter how long she stood beside Charles, the Queen had never truly accepted her as one of their own. And worse, perhaps neither had Anne, William, or even the nation. Behind closed doors that evening, Camilla confronted Charles. Though never officially confirmed, a close aide leaked that she challenged him, saying, "You promised me she came around, that she finally accepted us. Was that a lie?" Charles didn't respond, because honestly he didn't have an answer. The Queen had always been polite, professional, but warm? No. Forgiving? Maybe. Fully accepting? Never quite. And now the will confirmed it. Camilla was queen by circumstance, not by choice. What stung most wasn't the omission itself, but the undeniable clarity. The Queen could have granted Camilla symbolic legitimacy with a single sentence. Instead, her silence spoke volumes. Now Camilla stood exposed, not only before the public, but before herself. She held the title. She wore the crown. But in the one judgment that truly mattered, the Queen's final words, she was invisible. And that realization cut deeper than any crown ever could. As the revelations from Queen Elizabeth's secret will rippled through the palace halls, one couple found themselves at the heart of it all, not through scandal, but through quiet intention. Prince William and Princess Kate hadn't expected to receive anything so profound. After all, wills were formalities, and the line of succession had already been publicly established. Or so they believed. But what Anne read next changed everything. Hidden in the Queen's final pages was a personal letter, separate from the legal documents, penned in her unmistakable handwriting. It wasn't legally binding, but its symbolic weight was immense. To William and Catherine, the Queen wrote, "You are the future I trust most. Let no one, family or outsider, diminish your place. In you the crown finds its conscience once again." For a moment the room fell silent. Charles, who had emotionally withdrawn after learning of Anne's entrusted role, reportedly didn't react. But Camilla's jaw tightened noticeably. This was no mere formality. It was a royal endorsement. A clear sign that the Queen's true legacy belonged not to Charles and Camilla, but to William and Kate. What came next was even more revealing. The Queen had entrusted the couple with several personal heirlooms, not just jewelry, but private diaries, handwritten notes, and letters exchanged between herself and Princess Diana, carefully kept locked away since Diana's death. The Queen's message was unmistakable. These belong to Catherine. Let her keep them in quiet reverence. Diana would have wanted it that way. Kate reportedly wept quietly upon hearing this. She never sought to replace Diana, but she had long felt the weight of silent comparison. The media often cast her as the new people's princess, but now the queen herself had passed down the true heirloom to that title. In that moment, the crown took on a deeply personal meaning. William remained composed, but the emotion in his eyes betrayed the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another inheritance. It was a quiet coronation, not of titles or thrones, but of trust and lineage. Behind the scenes, palace aides began to whisper. Though unofficial, this letter carried more influence than many formal state announcements. Queen Elizabeth understood symbolism better than anyone. She knew what her gestures communicated, and she knew the monarchy could only endure if it rested on the right shoulders. Her message was unmistakable. Those shoulders belonged to William and Kate. In the days that followed, courtiers noticed a change. William carried himself with a new, quiet confidence. Kate showed up at events with a presence that was steady and assured, not flashy or loud. Together, they projected a renewed sense of unity, a clear understanding that they were now the true heart of the royal family, whether or not it was ever formally declared. But it wasn't just about them. It was about what they symbolized: Diana's compassion, Elizabeth's sense of duty, and the hope for the future. In a monarchy still healing from old wounds and internal divisions, the Queen's secret gift was more than a gesture. It was a recalibration of destiny. William and Kate weren't just carrying the weight of the crown, they were carrying its very soul. When the final line of Queen Elizabeth's secret will was read aloud, the room fell into a stunned, respectful silence. There were no grand gestures, no pointed criticisms, no public shaming, only one steady, final message. Duty must always rise above drama. That was the Queen's legacy. That was her way. For over 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II stood as a symbol of restraint, discipline, and unwavering dedication. Through wars, scandals, divorces, and the relentless march of the digital age, she remained the steady anchor of the monarchy. And in her last act, she used that same quiet strength to steer the crown through its stormiest moments. The will wasn't written to punish or humiliate. It didn't have to. It simply laid bare the truth: who she trusted, who had earned their place, and who clung to power out of ego rather than service. Charles, shattered by the realization that his mother had kept these truths until her dying breath, now faced a choice: embrace her vision or hold on to a fading grasp of authority. Camilla, despite her titles and ceremonial roles, was laid bare, not by accusation, but by omission. And that silence spoke louder than words. But the Queen's clearest trust was reserved for Princess Anne, the daughter who never sought the crown but always upheld its values, and for William and Kate, the couple she saw as the embodiment of continuity, grace, and a modern monarchy. There was no room left for chaos, no tolerance for grudges. The Queen's intentions were clear, not through speeches or televised announcements, but through ink and paper, the traditional way, the sovereign's way. And now, as the dust settles and the family comes back together, one truth remains unshakable: Elizabeth's word still rules. In a house fractured by decades of secrets and wounds, her final decree drew a line, not with anger, not with spectacle, but with finality. The crown, she reminded them all, doesn't belong to those who reach for it. It belongs to those who serve, and that was her last and greatest legacy.